of fools. We're all just passing through, passengers on a ship of fools. Sometimes I'm in a room where I don't belong, and the house is on fire and there's no alarm, and the walls are melting too. How about you? I've never been the favorite, thought I seen it all, till I got my invitation to the lunatic ball, and my friends are coming too, on a ship of fools. Don't worry, it's all just a symptom.
What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to what I am now calling the Caffeine, Sarcasm, and Insanity Podcast. Formerly, it was the Knee Account Phoenix Podcast. This is where we discuss cybersecurity and business-relevant topics. I am Chris Ruggieri, also called the Knee Account Phoenix. And I told you at the end of the first episode that I was barely getting warmed up. Now, before we dig into today's topic, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you can get notifications, and together we can help this channel grow. Obligatory legal disclaimers. Everything I say is my own personal opinions, observations, calculations, predictions, etc., and should not be taken as legal advice. And as always, everything I do is powered by caffeine, sarcasm, and insanity. Now, I know the first episode went a lot longer than it should have. It was the first episode. Consider it growing pains. I'll try to keep this one shorter, and any articles that I reference will be in the description. Now, the song in the intro was Shinedown's Symptom of Being Human. I'm actually wearing my Shinedown Sound of Madness hoodie right now. And yes, my hair is lighting up because I'm recording this during the day on Sunday, and the lights tell everyone in the house that I'm either in a meeting or doing a recording. Now, the intros are out of the way. Today's topic is one that really started late July, early August of 2023, involving the SEC's new disclosure ruling about cybersecurity disclosures for public companies. On July 26, 2023, the SEC released rules on cybersecurity risk management, strategy, governance, and incident disclosure by public companies ruling. Let's take a look at the press release for it and the final ruling. After all, the politicians, most of which have absolutely no clue how tech works, got done with it in early August. And this is the press release, like I said, July 26, 2023. It says annual reports for fiscal years ending on or after December 15th, 2023. If you dig into it, it basically says we have 4 days from the time we determine a breach to be of material financial impact to disclose it. And here is the final ruling, where it actually says the amendments are effective September 5th, 2023. Again, it basically says that any breach determined to be of material financial impact must be disclosed within 4 days. Now, on the surface, this ruling appears to just be a way for the SEC to track what they define as a material breach. For those that don't know, materiality it's a bit of a fluid definition. So much so, in fact, that PricewaterhouseCoopers calls it, and I'm slightly paraphrasing here, a judgment call. If we look at this article from PricewaterhouseCoopers, it says there's often a high degree of judgment in making a materiality determination, and it can benefit from an informed and deliberative process. At a minimum, this requires effective communication among the company's IT, security, finance, and legal departments. The goal is that those charged with making the materiality assessment, which notice is not defined, determining the appropriate response and evaluating the need for disclosure and the nature of those disclosures have the right information on a timely basis. Now, this is a humongous beef that I have with all of these so-called policies across the board. And again, this is just honest, off the cuff, personal opinion here. But if something is open to interpretation, it is not a policy. It's an opinion. Policies are clearly defined, cannot be open to interpretation. These are rules that get applied for the most part across the board. Now, obviously, there are some exceptions. There's going to be. If, say, there was a Raytheon or Northrop Grumman breach of the classified design specs for the new 6th Gen fighter, that's a threat to national security, and you might not want the public knowing about it in that little tiny 4-day window. Not to mention, since when do cybersecurity professionals determine materiality? Hashtag we don't, by the way. A little bit of a side note. In 1982, in keeping with the U.S. Supreme Court's decision, the SEC actually amended the definition of material in Rule 405 to read as follows. When used to qualify a requirement for the furnishing of information as to any subject, materiality limits the information required to those matters to which there is a substantial likelihood that a reasonable investor would attach importance in determining whether to purchase the security registered. Now, I read that very specifically. That's the actual SEC definition. Reasonable investor, substantial likelihood, those are open to interpretation. And that's the definition from 1982, when tech was still in its infancy. Still hasn't been updated. How can you apply a definition from 1982 to something that didn't exist in 1982? Not to mention, that definition is so incredibly vague as to be laughable when you apply it to tech. And if you think my insanity is off the mark here, Axio brought up a Supreme Court case from 2011 in Matrix Initiative versus Siracusano that is basically the dead heart of open to interpretation. Let's take a look at that real quick. In Matrix Initiatives versus Siracusano, claims were made that Matrix omitted material facts because they were aware of the negative financial impacts if they would have disclosed. Siracusano and other investors alleged that Matrix failed to disclose the material fact that one of its products, Zicam, was linked to anosmia, which is a total or partial loss of smell, in some of its customers. This information, while it may be technically qualitative, is still considered relevant in the decision-making process for investors. Matrix, of course, tried making the claim that the findings were statistically insignificant and therefore immaterial. So, Matrix is saying this is in a tiny little fraction of people. And what does the Supreme Court do? Justice Sotomayor said, given the medical professionals and regulators act on basis of evidence and causation that is not statistically significant, it stands to reason that in certain cases, reasonable investors would as well. And in the end, the courts ruled unanimously, I cannot speak English today apparently, in favor of the investors, stating that the company did in fact omit a material fact. If that is not a clear indicator of open to interpretation, if it's happening to a small itty-bitty fraction, but the SEC and the Supreme Court just say, it means whatever we want it to mean. And how much more money was spent because materiality is not a clearly defined item? And again, this is from 2011. This is way before the disclosure ruling. Haven't they learned anything in 13 years? Nope. I can answer that. Nope. Still vague, still open to interpretation, meaning that materiality can mean whatever the U.S. government wants it to mean. Showing again, this, in my mind, is a money grab. Again, on the surface, this is like a transparency move, letting the investors of these companies know that some stuff went down. It hit the fan, if you know what I mean. And here's where my abstract brain and weird train of thought comes in that drives a lot of people nuts, but This is a two-part article series that I wrote back in September and October of 2020. Small segue, I was extremely active writing articles and doing talks in 2020 through 2022. But back to the two articles. So this is the first one. Should ransomware payments be made illegal? First off, if you read the article, go through all the way to the bottom, I flat state, no, I do not support paying the ransom. That is a last-ditch effort. You shouldn't do it unless you have no other choice. But sometimes, guess what? We don't. But not why I'm bringing it up this time. I'm bringing it up because the CTO of Barracuda on February 4th of 2020 published this article in dark reading. Let me blow that up just a hair. Basically supporting the Treasury Directive and Treasury fines on the victim of a cybercrime. The second article in that series actually brought up some real-life consequences, in particular the Dusseldorf University Hospital case, where a patient had to be redirected and actually died in transit because they were under a ransomware attack, and instead of, again, it's weighing the numbers game, but they did not pay the ransom. Granted, the ransomware gang in this case actually gave them the decryption keys, but they were down long enough that they had to redirect someone, and they passed away in transit. So there's flat, true, hard data proof of this having life and death consequences. So just keep that in the back of your head. And this is the actual Treasury Directive press release from September of 21 when it actually passed and went through. And it was a whole of government effort to counter ransomware. Obviously, as you can tell from my tone, from those articles, I am very against this. Now, you're probably asking yourself what the Treasury Directive on ransomware attacks has to do with the SEC disclosure ruling. I am so glad you asked. In the second article of that series, and I quote, "Government is not seeking advice from actual tech people that have been fighting these threats for decades and are therefore passing regulations with disastrous long-term consequences." Goes back to the life and death situation. Some of those consequences have been, according to Tech Republica, hey, there's been fewer ransomware attacks in 2022. Only a quarter of the respondents said they were victims of ransomware in 22. That's a 64% drop. Well, we had already said that if this Treasury Directive goes through, that people are not going to be reporting it. Keep that in the back of your head too, because it's going to come back up. So let's merge the two. The SEC requires publicly traded companies to disclose a breach, which a ransomware attack can be considered a breach. Treasury Directive punishes the victim of a cybercrime if they pay the ransom. 2 + 2 = 4 on that one. Now you have the same politicians that have no idea how tech works. You have a ruling that requires a disclosure, which then triggers a Treasury Directive investigation, and it all adds up to one thing. Our lovely, and I use that term with as much sarcasm and abject disgust as humanly possible, government sticking their hand into everybody's cookie jar again. And this is why I don't discuss politics usually. Because A, it's polarizing. B, both parties suck at their jobs. And C, all any of them do is just point fingers at the other side. It's like that Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other. So, and this is kind of a throwback to my first podcast, I don't plant my flagpole. Sorry for the squirrel moment. So I was going to keep this one shorter. Let's get back to the money grab at hand. I mean matter at hand. I'm sorry. Freudian slip. UpGuard. It's a platform I respect and love. They had this to say about ransomware versus a data breach. UpGuard has it listed. During a data breach, cyber criminals aim to access and steal sensitive information like social security numbers, credit card details, passwords, personal data, phone numbers, etc., etc. Primary difference between a data breach and a ransomware attack is monetary gain, not data theft. Now, the conversation had this to say. They did not differentiate between one or the other. The headlines are filled with news about ransomware attacks tying up organizations, large and small, data breaches at major name brand companies, cyber attacks by shadowy hacker organizations with Russia, China, North Korea, blah, blah, blah. All these threats to your personal information. Ransomware attack in a pipeline company? Probably not. I disagree with that statement. Hack by a foreign asset of a government agency? Maybe. Yeah, especially if you are a government employee. I'm working on another article about tying the Equifax, OPM, and Anthem breaches, but that's a whole nother discussion. Data breach at a credit bureau, social media company, a major retailer, pretty likely that it's a threat to your personal information. But here's the point. Those of us in the trenches, and that's another throwback to both of the ransomware articles I wrote, know that these are not mutually exclusive. Experience shows us time and again, as is evident by the very existence of the phrase double ransomware or double extortion ransomware, that ransomware is usually the last thing the attacker is going to detonate. Usual progression is breach. Your persistence and exfil are usually going on around the same time. And then if you're about to get caught or you've already gotten everything you wanted, that's when they detonate the ransomware. And again, one of the things that was brought up during the Treasury Directive conversations was that fewer companies would be reporting ransomware attacks because they don't want to pay the fine. We're 3 years later from that conversation. Let's see if the data supports that conjecture. These are the numbers from IC3 for 2022, basically showing just over 800,000 or so complaints, 10.3 billion. Varonis has said ransomware has been continuing to rise. CSO Online. This is what that double extortion we were just talking about. You may get your files back because you had good backups or however you decide to defend your organization, but if they already have the data. So it's not only, oh, we'll pay you to decrypt your data that we just encrypted, but if you don't pay us a second time, we're going to leak it out to everybody. And then Statistica. I love this one. Again, 2022. In the last 2 quarters of 2022, this proves my statement, proves everything right here. Global ransomware attacks increased by over 50%, going from over 102 million to nearly 155 million cases. In recent years, the highest number of global ransomware attacks were registered in the second quarter of 2021, when organizations worldwide reported encountering 188.9 million ransomware attacks. Now, wait a tick. 102 to 155 in just the last 2 quarters of 2022. But the feds show the entire year of 2022 with 800,000 some odd cases. Yes, I understand IC3 and the feds are only dealing with the US, but you cannot tell me that from 800,000 to, let's just say, 110 million, there's no way anyone would believe that that's not some companies in the U.S. That sounds a lot like those incidents just aren't getting reported, doesn't it? So here we are with the hard data proof that exactly what we were going to say was going to happen in 2020. We said, hey, if y'all do this, they're not going to report it anymore. Now it's happening. And now we have incoming government assistance from the SEC, right?
The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
This is where the SEC disclosure directive comes in. The government swooping in to help. First off, yes, I just shuddered. No. All this is, and the reporting numbers prove it, government is wanting to make sure they get their cut. It is 100% just another case of
You got your hand caught in a cookie jar, didn't you?
and here's where I'm probably going to bring a little bit of heat and kind of the crux of legislation in general, in my opinion. First off, have you seen the crypt keepers we're somehow been keeping alive in Washington? Most of them had to fight dinosaurs for their breakfast. When you turn on CNN, CNBC, C-SPAN, or any other live feed from the floor, both the House and Senate are agreeing with this crap. It's time to reevaluate, people. A lot of these people were elected when PCs and the internet were not even a thing. Hell, half of them were elected before ARPANET was even invented in 1969. For those that don't know, ARPANET is what became the internet, and damn it, now Summer of 69 is playing in my head. Squirrel moment. So why do we have all these people that are barely being kept alive by some kind of ancient sorcery or another that I haven't figured out yet, making legislation on things they have absolutely no clue how it works? Half can't read a teleprompter, half can't form complete logical sentences, but they're going to swoop in. Help? Help with what? It'll take them 4 years how to turn the bloody system on, let alone understand how ransomware and breaches work. But they can run on the, oh, I'm smart enough to turn my machine on, see how I'm up to date, re-elect me, not my opponent. Come on. I mean, seriously, look into every piece of legislation surrounding tech, every single hearing, all of it surrounding tech. Every one of the pieces of legislation contradicts themselves because they have no idea how it works. And instead of asking us out here that know how it works, they just keep spitting out dumb bill after dumb bill. We got dumb bills from dumbbells. Look, first off, don't get this twisted. I love this country. I swore to defend and protect it, and I would die trying if that's what it took. But that doesn't mean I have to like the idiots trying to run it. And I don't care what side of the aisle it's on. It's all of them. You want proof of how much they have no idea how tech works? Look no further than the questions that were asked during the Cambridge Analytica scandal. How is Facebook free? Zuckerberg basically looked at him like, ads? I mean, ads? Duh. Or even worse, this lovely piece of insanity. So in this article from the Hacker News, that same disclosure ruling that we're talking about says that the SEC makes no distinction between data exposed in a breach that was stored on-premise, in the cloud, or in SaaS environments. That's actually a very, very key statement. In the SEC's own words, we do not believe that a reasonable investor would view a significant data breach as immaterial merely because of the data are housed, I love that part, are housed on a cloud service. First off, that should be is. Second of all, have you even seen the shared responsibility model? There's a nice little graphic that tells you who's responsible for the security for each of the different types of cloud services. It's right here. Yes, the customer is responsible for data classification. Yes, the customer is responsible for identity and access management. Everything else is on the provider. But the SEC statement just blows that right out of the water. Why? Because they have absolutely no clue how it works. It's all just techno-babble and techno-sorcery to them. And all they care about is their cut, their pound of flesh. I mean, everyone knows about the solar winds breach, but it's called the solar winds breach. It's not any of the Fortune 500 that it actually hit breach. It's not the US government got pwned breach, because they got hit from solar winds too. So, why this episode of Caffeine, Sarcasm, and Insanity? Because I am begging. I will seriously get on my busted knees and beg for politicians to consult respected experts in these fields. Now, I'm not talking about C-level and senior leadership, because a lot of them, it has been so long since they've actually been in the trenches, they don't really know what's going to happen downstream. They don't see it because they're not in it every day. But experts that are in the trenches every day, that know exactly what the ramifications of these toilet paper legislation bills will be. Please, please consult respected experts actually in the trenches to see what impact this will have on things, how enforceable it is, etc., before drafting or signing something that you have absolutely no idea about. Here is one of my pet peeves, but here's a perfect example. The California, Virginia, Connecticut, Colorado, Utah, Oregon, Montana, Iowa, Tennessee, Indiana, Delaware, and New Jersey privacy laws. Yeah. Everyone that knows me knows I was going to bring that one up. Yeah, most of them are comparable enough where compliance with one means compliance with the other. But here's the question. Who's responsible for regulating interstate commerce? Let me introduce you to a little something. It's called the Dormant Commerce Clause. The Dormant Commerce Clause is a constitutional doctrine that prevents a state from enacting a law or regulation that places an excessive burden on interstate commerce. This part of the Commerce Clause is dormant because it is not explicitly stated in the Constitution, but is instead inferred by the courts. There's that interpretation problem again. From the text of the Commerce Clause. Cases including the Dormant Commerce Clause often arise when a state tries to boost its economy by favoring in-state businesses over out-of-state businesses conducting activities in that state. Think about that for a second. Even the Dormant Commerce Clause has interpretation issues. It even says in here, interpretations of it means whatever the heck they want it to mean. And there's not even a definition of commerce. I mean, if we don't know what commerce is, how do we know if we're regulating interstate commerce? I mean, all of this open to interpretation. So, if we are going to interpret that, then we got to take a step back. We got to say, wait.
Hold up.
That would mean every single privacy law from those states, the SEC disclosure ruling, and the Treasury Directive are technically unconstitutional, or they're inapplicable to states not doing business, not based in those states. Because having to create an entire new department, adding headcount, changing all of your processes to follow CPRA or VCDPA for Virginia or any of these privacy laws, that is definitely something that I would classify as an excessive burden. How about y'all? So my question is,
how, in the name of Zeus's butthole,
have these not been challenged yet? Now you're probably asking yourself, how do we go from the SEC disclosure ruling to the Treasury Directive, now to the privacy laws? Simple answer. They all have one thing in common. the government wanting their cut. The SEC fines for not disclosing, the Treasury fines for paying the ransom, the fines for many of these privacy regulations, they don't go to the people that are affected by it. Oh, hell no. They go straight in the government's pockets. And they're wanting to take more and more from companies, and by extension, us as consumers, which then drives inflation, and that starts a whole other loop of insanity. But we do have a little bit of delicious irony again. The first of my articles on the Treasury Directive called out the CTO of Barracuda, who supported that Treasury Directive in September 2020. But then, this happens in May of 2023.
Oh, check it out. Look, 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 look.
Our friends at Barracuda got a 0 day in October of 22. Keep in mind, this was published in May of 23, but Chinese-backed actors have high confidence, according to Mannion, that they're the ones responsible. It took them 7 months to figure this out. And here is where the delicious irony comes in, because, CTO Barracuda was for the ransomware and all of these directives. It hit US government emails. And this is why people that live in glass houses should not throw stones. SolarWinds and now Barracuda? And last I checked, the SEC and Treasury weren't US Congress. So how's about the government get its own house in order before coming after our houses? Just a thought. Just saying. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. That's what it is. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the annotated Constitution lays out all the commerce powers and who has them. Spoiler alert, it's not the SEC or Treasury. The link will be in the description, but, here's just a really quick look of the annotated Constitution. There's supposedly a definition for meaning of commerce, but they're not using it because it's not clear, and they're interpreting it however the heck they want to. So, there's that. And before people say that I'm paranoid, which I'll admit I can be at times, by saying that an SEC disclosure will trigger a Treasury directive, small reminder, Black Cat, Alfie, Dark Side, Dark Matter, whatever the heck they're going to call themselves next, that's a ransomware as a service platform. The affiliate that hit ChangeHealthcare didn't get paid. Black Cat kept it. $22 million worth. And then they went dark. $22 million from ChangeHealthcare before scamming its affiliates ahead of a possible rebrand, which is why I said whatever the heck they're going to call themselves next. You can pretty much bet that if that funding had gone to the affiliate, Treasury would be looking in to see if that affiliate had any ties at all. A brother's, cousin's, best friend's, nephew's, aunt's, mama, whatever type of tie is all they would need. And then you have, this is just tripping me out right now, the same government that is saying, oh, we're going to punish you for this. They're now going in and saying that, oh, we need to, in a letter to Congress, the American Hospital Association urged lawmakers to have a federal government fund. Think about that for a second. The exact same government that said, we're going to punish you if you pay a ransom. We're going to punish you if you don't disclose whatever materiality means in their eyes at that particular second. Oh, but we'll set up this fund over here for you. Come on. I can't be the only one to see this. I mean, I know it's caffeine, sarcasm, and insanity, but this is clearly people that have no idea what they're doing. I'll say the same thing I said in the first article. You can check all the boxes, you can do everything right, and you can still get burned. But what do I know? I'm just some schmuck nobody in Alabama. But I hope I gave everybody a little something to ponder. I'm going to leave you with one final link coming out of the ChangeHealthcare cluster. All the class action lawsuits. As of right now, there are at least 5 that have been filed in Tennessee and Minnesota. And the HIPAA Journal flat says that number is expected to grow considerably over the coming days, weeks, and months. Right there. That number is expected to grow. And that'll only drive healthcare costs higher and higher. As if we didn't have enough on our plates, right? And you can be sure we're not the ones going to come out on top. All right. Time for me to climb back off the soapbox. I hope you enjoyed the second episode of the podcast. Remember, all the articles I've talked about will be in the description. And if you like this content, again, please like, share, comment, subscribe, all the things. And keep an eye out for new content. I've already got episodes 3 and 4 rattling around up in that spiderweb up that's inside my head. Might have brought a little bit of heat on this one, but still just the beginning. Cheers. We're back, YouTube. Sorry about that. I know I said I was getting off the soapbox, but something happened Wednesday. Today is now Friday, March 15th, 2024. Towards the end of the podcast, I said the ChangeHealthcare incident, breach, whatever you want to call it, would lead to other government agency investigations. Well, here's the thing. We've got ChangeHealthcare now facing the Office of Civil Rights under DHHS investigation. So exactly what we said was going to happen just happened. But, in the words of Malcolm Reynolds,
That sounds like the alliance. Unite all the planets under one rule so that everybody can be interfered with or ignored equally.
for anybody that didn't get that reference, it's from Firefly. But I'm going to quote it a second time, because honestly, it needs to be said.
It's a real burden being right so often.
Again, I can't be the only one that sees this. There has to be other people out there, especially in positions of authority and power, that are looking at this going, yeah, if you do this, this is the next logical progression. Politicians, please, I am begging you. Consult the industry experts before you do something that has insane consequences. This time I am done. I am climbing off the soapbox. Next episode's going to be about resiliency in critical infrastructure and some regulation and deregulation side of life on that. Should be dropping in about 4 weeks. Until then, y'all have fun.